Some moments in cricket leave an indelible mark, not just on the game, but on entire nations, careers, and even the global cricketing landscape. Today, we rewind the clock and spotlight the biggest such moments.
From tactical blunders to career altering decisions, these are the pivotal turning points that shape cricket as we know it. Buckle up as we dissect the game's greatest fork in the road moments that we have ever seen.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Reverse Sweep Show. As ever, this is your host SS joining with me is my co-host AB. How is it going, AB?
All good, SS. Uh, as I told you last time around, and to all the viewers and listeners getting into the normal routine after the New Year's and Christmas break. So here we are recording another podcast episode. And also missing the cricketing action these days, waiting quite eagerly for the England India series to begin. How are things at your end, SS? What's going on? What's on your mind?
Yeah, we don't have much Indian cricket to follow on the pitch, but there have been a lot of off the pitch developments that have been happening. A lot of squad announcements, inclusions, exclusions, Karun Nair, the dressing room leaks, uh, and the new BCCI policy coming out as well. So a lot of talking points from that perspective, but we look forward to the England ODI series. Uh, but for today, we felt that we could do a meta episode. People could call it the meta of all metas regarding this podcast because this is a what if hypothetical podcast. We wanted to look back at the cricket that we have seen, the cricket we have read about and listened from others, and pick three stories from the time of cricket which we feel are the most consequential in our eyes. This is going to be a new series in as part of the Reverse Sweep Show. This is not going to be the only episode. We might do more episodes of such sort. And basis some kind of feedback that we get from you guys, maybe we will do a full-blown episode on some of them. And I'm pretty sure that some of these will land up as full-blown episodes. So having set the agenda, AB, I know that you have put some thought in coming up with your three stories of the day. Is there a certain theme that you are following?
Yeah, when we discussed on the format for the episode and that each of us will pick three topics, three stories rather, I thought of a theme which I find very interesting, which is more around commercialization of the game over the years. Cricket, as we know it, has gone through drastic changes in the last 4 or 5 decades. And that is where I want to pick up on a few stories. So that is my broad theme, which is cricket's commercialization and how it has changed through the years. What about you, SS? Do you have a certain theme in mind? What kind of stories are you going to talk about today?
Yeah, I had also some pointers running in my head when I was crafting my three stories of today's episode. I wanted to pick stories that I have lived through, that I have watched with my own eyes and experienced the emotions then when it was happening and unfolding. Um, and also picking stories that have consequences for the entire cricketing team and the country in general. That was my big idea about how I would want to present these stories today. So, having set the in motion about today's episode, AB, I will pass it to you to tell our listeners about the first story that you have picked for today. Um, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is something that people will really enjoy listening to.
Absolutely. So for the first story, I go back in time, first to September of 24. That was when SS we were at a cafe in Azerbaijan discussing about this very podcast and this very topic. And this topic is again back in time, back to 2007. And when I talk about 2007, I think everyone would have already guessed the topic that we are going to talk about. So, starting off with the 50 over World Cup in West Indies, we all remember that we had a star studded team, but a slightly dysfunctional one at that, as we know from records from back in the day. A very headstrong coach that we had, the team did not get well together. And as a result, we bombed the 50 over World Cup. After that, a lot of pressure on the BCCI. a lot of senior players realizing that they don't want to play in the T20 World Cup. So a lot of big names not featuring in the T20 World Cup. On the side, there was also a lot of pressure on the BCCI from ICL, the Indian Cricket League, and after that we had the 2007 World Cup, which we won, and that had a major ripple effect on Indian cricket at large. So we had IPL coming up, we had a huge amount of money coming in into Indian cricket. Because of that, Indian cricket's position in the world cricket became very, very dominant as we know it today. So this is the broad story that I have, and there are so many what ifs here. One, what if India had done decently well at the 50 over World Cup? That would have meant a very different shape and form of the team that went to the T20 World Cup, and maybe we would not have won that World Cup. And at a micro level, we all remember that catch that Sreesanth took of Misbah ul Haq, and we finally lifted that World Cup. What if he had dropped that catch? Because we all saw how uncomfortable he was. And from recent interviews, Robin Uthappa also told that Sreesanth has had some eye issues, had some sight issues, and he's not very adept at picking up depths. So he could have very well dropped that catch. And so that is the big what if. What if India had lost that 2007 World Cup? And what could have happened because of that? So, SS, having said that story and having said the context in the what if, I want to get your initial perspective on what you feel could have happened because of that.
I loved your idea of picking the first topic, which is so close to the genesis of this podcast itself. So kudos to you on that. And yeah, it is such a meta of all metas topic. There is so many angles, aspects, scenarios, and perspectives around this. Um, if Sachin would have traveled for the T20 World Cup, one argument could be we could have had an even stronger batting lineup because he was the one senior player that we trusted would do well in any format, and his form hadn't vanished, and he'd already picked some runs in the England tour. So we might have won it more convincingly also, the T20 World Cup. So one argument is that, but more or less, yeah, it would have affected the cohesiveness. It was a new coaching setup as well that went to T20 World Cup. Lal Chand Rajput, Venkatesh Prasad, Robin Singh. But I think the big one was that after the debacle in the ODI World Cup, a lot of pressure from the media as well. Subhash Chandra led Z XL Group, SL Group came up with this ICL, and for once, BCCI got triggered by this and wanted to do something, and T20 World Cup was just a shot in the arm to expedite the process. And for once, BCCI and Indian cricket wasn't behind the curve that they generally are on these kind of things, like DRS, for example, like day-night test matches and pink ball. We are always behind the curve. We were here as well. T20 had been playing had been played in England and a bit in Australia, but this was like the big one. If this wouldn't have happened, the scenario that you put out, maybe IPL would have come 3, 4 years later down the line, and by then, English cricket would have gone through the English Premier League model and foreign ownership allowed, and maybe a Trent Bridge side would have been bought by Shah Rukh Khan. So money would have poured there, and ECB would have become richer and challenged BCCI's hegemony. So there are so many pointers around it. But what is your uh, hypothetical shootout on this one?
Yeah, I think the T20 World Cup win in 2007 was such a pivotal moment for Indian cricket at large. IPL was a much, much bigger success because of that. And as you very rightly put, it was a shot in arm for the BCCI. And plus, again, we have discussed it time and again that BCCI has been very slow, or rather slow, in adopting to new things, new innovations like the RS, as we spoke about, day-night test matches. We still haven't fully adopted those. So pretty sure if we didn't win the T20 World Cup back then, IPL would have been a few years late, and the success would have been a bit muted. The response would have been a lot more muted because the audience, the like for that particular format sees its origin from the 2007 World Cup. You remember all the iconic moments from then, the bowl out between India and Pakistan,
Yeah.
Yuvraj's six sixes, then the final catch that Sreesanth took to win us the cup. All these are in the imaginations of Indian cricket fans till date, and this is where the entire love for that format is rooted. And I'm pretty sure
Absolutely.
if we didn't win that World Cup, that memory wouldn't be as sweet, and probably the format wouldn't have seen such a lot of traction in India. Eventually, probably yes, but pretty sure we would have missed that bus. We would have missed that early advantage, and might have even conceded that to England. So maybe England board would have been the strongest in world cricket right now, which also means that our say in world cricket would have been lesser at this point of time. Right now, we are the strongest board, strongest individual market when it comes to cricket. That might have been challenged. So that is my take on it. And with that said, SS, over to you for your first story.
Yeah, it's quite well connected to the theme that you brought up. We won the ODI, the T20 World Cup under MS Dhoni. MS Dhoni, that was the start of the legend that is Thala. And we go to 2011 now. Now he's a well settled all format captain for India, becoming the great finisher that he had. I think this was his peak years. And we really went into the World Cup at home thinking that we were the favorites, and for all the good reasons. We had an exceptional batting lineup, good amount of spin all-rounders as well, and decent enough pace attack for Indian conditions. We played really well in the World Cup, reached the final. Sri Lanka were a tough team back then. They were always in and around World Cup finals and semi-finals in all formats then. They made 274. All all hopes pinned on Sachin at Wankhede, the biggest game of his career, and 31 for 2. Young Virat Kohli tries to steer the ship with Gautam Gambhir, and then he gets out. And it was 114, I think, Indian scorecard when he went out. And people were all expecting Yuvraj to come out. He has been such exceptional form with both bat and ball. But lo and behold, it was Dhoni coming out. No precedence of this in the World Cup till then, except for I think the Netherlands or Irish Ireland game when he did come up to just finish the game, but not when the chase was still a long way off. And he hadn't been scoring a lot of runs, so it was a surprise. And then, of course, all the rational comes in, left and right hand batting combination. Also, he played a lot of Murli in CSK, and that was the biggest threat in the middle overs, along with Randeep, who was bowling. And he played a stellar innings. That was like the proper solidifying of Dhoni's legacy as a true legend of the sport, Indian game, his famous six, India winning the World Cup. So many what ifs if he would not have pushed himself. There are still so many conversations on podcasts, in radio shows, on comedy shows, people asking that 2011 team every time, anytime a World Cup comes. We always ask that bunch of players about that Dhoni's promotion, and there are so many theories who said what, who basically promoted, was it Dhoni and whatever. But that decision making typified Dhoni, that I will take the match by the scruff of the neck and I will be the guy who will be doing it. So my what if around it is if Dhoni didn't decide to come up the order, what could have unfolded in the match? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, as you very rightly said, that there are some of these instances, some decisions that Dhoni has taken throughout his captaincy career, which still leaves us all baffled. Whether it is the final over being given to Joginder Sharma in 2007 or promoting himself up the batting order in 2011. I personally feel Yuvraj was in the form of his life in that particular World Cup, and eventually also went on to win the player of the tournament. And Gautam Gambhir was extremely well settled at that point and played a very, very important knock to help win the tournament for us. I feel had Yuvraj gone in, of course, the matchup would have been against us. Murli was a big factor because we see, like, we don't know the real reason for it, but at least in the movie, that is what they say, that Dhoni promoted himself because he was better at playing Murli, and the matchup would have been in our favor. So, but I still feel that had Yuvraj gone in with a well settled Gambhir, Yuvraj would have given us that kick, would have scored fast runs for us, and they would have still been able to create that partnership. And then with Dhoni and Raina still in the dressing room, we could have won that match. because the early jolts that we got after the quick wickets of Sehwag and Sachin, the ship had been stabilized by Kohli and by Gambhir. And I feel we would have still gone on to win the match. Maybe the end picture, the end image that everyone remembers of Dhoni hitting the six to win us the cup would have been a bit different. Maybe it would have been Gambhir or Yuvraj, but I think we would have still won the match and also the World Cup. What's your take on it, SS?
Yes, a slightly different take. We saw in the semi-finals a collapse happening, Yuvraj getting out. I remember that. I think it was Umar Gul who was doing a lot of wonders in the semi-finals, I remember. So Murli, like all great off spinners, like our very own Ashwin, exceptional against left-handers. Yuvraj had played a lot of good knocks in his history against Sri Lanka. I remember a 98 in a ODI series in Sri Lanka where he tackled Murli very well. And even a 60% Murli, which he was at that point of his career, very late. I think circumstances, the pressure, maybe, just maybe, that's my biased take that Yuvraj would have gotten out. And then with Raina and Dhoni, it would have left them too much to do with the run chase, with the run rate as well, with chasing a big score. Yeah, when I look back, I think that we will fall short by 30 runs in that final. We would have given a good fight, and Dhoni would have played well. But Murli would have finished his quota of overs with taking out both Raina and Yuvraj. Even that 60% of Murli. I think those overs played out uh, by Dhoni always going on his back foot through the offside. It was really good. He timed the chase perfectly well. Maybe he would be rushed into the chase if he had come later down the order. So I think that was an exceptional decision by him, and India wouldn't have won the World Cup, and the scar would have remained. So that's my take on this story. We have done one round. Now I'll pass it over to you, AB, for your second story.
Yeah, staying true to my theme of commercialization of the sport, this time I'll take you all back to the 70s. So this is 1977. Cricket is still not as commercialized a sport as we know of it right now. Players are still making very less amounts of money from the boats that they are playing for. It is still primarily Test cricket, which is happening all across the world, 5 days in whites under the lights, sorry, under the sun. But then Kerry Packer in Australia has a beef with Australian Cricket Board. The reason because they just won't give him the rights for the matches that Australian team plays, and the reason because they have a very cozy relationship with ABC, the local media network there. So Kerry Packer decides to wage a war against the Australian Cricket Board and start his own private cricket tournament. He starts the World Series of Cricket, signs up a lot of players from across the world, primarily from Australia, England, West Indies, even Pakistan and New Zealand, and is able to do 2 seasons of his World Series of Cricket with a lot of innovations. Innovations which we see till date. Something like playing under the floodlights, colored kits, drop in pitches, and so much more. This was the first time when cricket was played around fans. So they wanted to create a spectacle for fans instead of staying true to the sport as Test cricket is. They wanted to create something for the fans to enjoy and see. Although the series didn't last more than 2 years, but then it still has such deep impact on it on the sport that we know. The salaries, the wages for the players, they went up. So much adoption of ODI cricket, 50 over format, colored kits, playing under the floodlights became very normal. So that is my second biggest story. So what if World Series of Cricket didn't happen? What if Kerry Packer was given that media right by Australian Cricket Board the first time around? So what's your take on it, SS? What do you think would have happened to the sport had it not
Yeah,
happened?
very interesting story. Maybe the ICL guys were trying to look back in history and take inspiration from Kerry Packer, but unfortunately, none of their innovation, so to speak, came to the fore. Maybe also precisely that a lot of current playing cricketers went to Kerry Packer, while in ICL case it was usually uh, the first story that you picked on ICL IPL. It was a lot of players who were at the fag end of their careers. Chris Gaines, Brian Lara, and all these guys went. Very few current cricketers went, and they were banned by their boards. as well. Uh, I think what I remember and what I have read about it, what I've listened to the podcast, generally on the innovation front. It was short-lived, but a lot of innovation which still continues to date, which was adopted in the mainstream, and that tells a lot of the success of Kerry Packer. Uh, and I think cricket would have fallen behind and become a second-rate sport. It was to keep it to the changing tastes of the viewer in Australia and around the world, giving ample opportunity in terms of player wage and giving them, I think, that labor right in a way. So it was great for the game, and I think if that wouldn't have happened, I think cricket would have diminished in terms of a sport which players want to pick up, and I think it would have still been a sport to follow in Commonwealth countries. But I think it did propagate the growth. I think that is what I understand of the entire Kerry Packer thing. And in terms of innovations, I think full marks to them. They would have been slower to adopt when it comes to international cricket. And a lot of good series that worldwide. India challenged Australia pretty hard in Australia because a lot of players played for Gary Packer as well, and they were missing. So we have some stories also from that aspect. So I think if you look back, uh, just disregard the animosity, but I think in a total strength, it was quite good and quite positive net for the game of cricket.
I kind of aligned to what you are saying. In fact, I feel that it was a very decisive moment when it comes to the overall evolution of the sport, because we see all around other sports like soccer, NBA, basketball, even rugby. These are sports which are much faster. They get over in a 2 hour duration. And cricket, because of being so long and so slow, I think could have lost out on that fan base had it not been for that innovation. And if we had lost it back then we would have been way behind all the other major sports in the world. Probably even in India, maybe soccer would have been the primary sport, or maybe hockey would have been that sport and not cricket. And that would have meant that India would have lost out on a lot of, not India, but globally, cricket would have lost out on a lot of fan base.
Yeah, it gives us an idea if Kerry Packer didn't happen uh, about the global, and if Kapil Dev did not win us the World Cup in '83, combination of both two, maybe
Yeah,
cricket
absolutely.
wouldn't have reached that height in India
Yeah.
that it is right now.
Absolutely. And in fact, even Shane Warne went on record and said that we owe a lot to Kerry Packer for all the innovations that he brought in. And I think he
Yeah,
also changed how ICC looks at the sport. Instead of focusing on the sport, they started focusing more on the fans as well, on what
yeah.
people would like to watch and where the money can come in from. And that also propelled the growth of the sport in the next decades.
A case in point that sometimes private innovation can be helpful.
Absolutely. With that said, SS, what's your second story of the day?
For the second story, I'm staying in the land down under. Although the Ashes that I'm going to talk about happened in UK, but that's like considered to be one of the greatest Test series ever. Australia versus England, Ashes 2005. Australia wins the first Test match, low scoring at Lord's, but Glenn McGrath at the peak of his prowess, metronomic with his line and length, creating all kinds of problems. And this was an England side that had hoped to come to this Ashes brimming with confidence, great bowling attack, ability to pick 20 wickets, generational player like Flintoff, a good opening partnership of Strauss and Trescothick, young blood like Peterson. So they had all the momentum in terms of their hopes and everything that they wanted to reverse 20 years of pain. I think they had lost 7 or 8 Ashes in a row. And then second test match, Edgbaston, morning of the test, and Glenn McGrath in one of those innocuous training drills rolls his ankles over a cricket ball, apparently misses the test match, and it allows England to capitalize. Kasparovich and Brett took wickets but conceded a lot of runs, and England had the bowling to take care of it. Simon Jones in the form of his life. It was one of the most famous test matches in the history of cricket, two-run victory. When Kasparovich nicks behind, people still don't know if DRS was there, what would have happened, but England equalized. McGrath came back in the third test match. Uh, it was a very close fought at Old Trafford. I think Ponting hung around with the last pair to draw the test match. Fourth test match, McGrath, I think, again misses because of an injury, and this time Trescothick and Strauss go for a big partnership, fast partnership. Australia fought back in the second innings, but England held on, won by three wickets. Geraint Jones, I remember, and the keeper holding up at one end, and it was too late in the fifth test match. So McGrath missing, his incredible control would have, I think, curtailed England's run scoring. Even though England's bowling was really good and they were dominating Australian batsmen, the series would have been very close. So there are a lot of pointers that come out of this. What would have happened in the series, in England's psyche, in total Ashes equation that they both had, and England's resurgence in terms of Test cricket, having had pretty bad 15, 20 years in all formats, especially the Test matches. What
Yeah.
is your angle around it?
I feel it was such a closely fought series overall, series of such fine margins. And one of the reasons why everyone remembers that series is because England, being the underdogs, were able to pull up and win the series. And of course, because of the games going so close, I feel McGrath, with all the weight of experience, skill that he brings in, with the entire reputation that he brings in, would have tipped the scales very much in favor of the Australians. And those fine margins would have gone in favor of the Australian team. A few less runs scored by English batters would have definitely helped Australia win those critical moments and the matches. So, net, I feel McGrath is a huge factor in that equation, and England would have lost the series because of those key moments.
Yeah. I think we always talk Test cricket is about picking 20 wickets. We saw it in the recent BGT as well with Nitish Reddy and Washington Sundar and Jadeja factors. Uh, I think England would have gone down 2-0. They would have lost a second Test match if McGrath played, and he was in such great form as well at Lords. So I think it would have been a closely fought series, but Australia could have won 2-1 maybe, or 3-1, or even if it was a draw, Australia would have retained the Ashes. So and England's psyche would have continued to be like they still feel inferior to Australian cricket, especially in Ashes. They won a couple of Ashes, but more importantly, Australia haven't won a series in England since 2001. So uh, even though England poured a lot of resources in improving their red ball, and that eventually they could have won an Ashes here and there, but that generation of players and the kind of stardom that they achieved and they did challenge, and I think this is one blot on that Ponting's Australian team that when coming up with great opposition who has ability to pick 20 wickets, they did not win the series. In fact, they lost the series. So it has impact on both of them. Remember, I think after England won the series, all of them got the Order of British Empire, OBE or MBE, I think, Member of British Empire, the kind of accolade that the Queen gives. And Collingwood got it. He played just the fifth test match and scored 17 runs. And Shane Warne remarked that just for getting 17 runs, you get a MBE. That says a lot about how that England team was perceived by the public. That was the start of England's resurgence in a way. So huge shot in the arm for them and their overall coming back into the top echelons of cricket. All right, then. That was my second story. Passing it over to you, AB, for your final one for today.
That was an interesting story, SS, and one that didn't come to my mind initially, and I'm glad that we got a chance to discuss that. Now, coming to my third story. So, we started off in 2007, we went back in time to 1977. Now, we'll again come back to the 2000s. So, the year is 2009, and we see that IPL has become a very strong league. Asian cricket is becoming very dominant, and in fact, a good chunk of global cricket fan base sits in the subcontinent. So India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. This is the new cricketing hub of the global cricket landscape. And but then we also see clouds of terrorism loom over India and Pakistan. There was 26/11 in Mumbai. Then the big event which happened in Pakistan. So Sri Lanka was touring Pakistan, and in Lahore, morning of the third day of the second test match, the Sri Lankan team, while going to the ground, gets attacked by terrorists. Fortunately, none of the players are severely injured. A few of them have minor injuries, but then the match gets called off as it should have been. The series gets called off. And for much of the next 1 decade, most of the international cricket in Pakistan gets called off. Teams stop visiting Pakistan to play matches, and there's such a huge vacuum in Pakistan. And when we also look at commercialization of cricket, that was my theme initially, then the subcontinent becomes very much dominant by India, because Pakistan completely loses out on all the international cricket. Sri Lanka, being the small country, the island nation that it is, has limited scope for that, and Bangladesh again is a much weaker economy. So India becomes the dominant force there, and hence the entire dynamics of power in that region shifts towards India. And that also kind of leads us to the big three era that we always keep talking about, with India, England, and Australia being the three major boards globally. Maybe it could have been Pakistan as well. Maybe it could have been the big four. Maybe the Indian Pakistan rivalry would have been so much more different had that attack not happened on the Sri Lankan team. So that is my third story. The what if being, what if that terror attack didn't happen on the Sri Lankan cricket team? What if cricket stayed back in Pakistan for the next 1 decade? What would have happened? And what are your thoughts on that, SS?
Yeah, very interesting. Ties in with your theme. I think 26-11 was a big thing as well, but India were able to get England on board to play a series, and the continuation of cricket continued to be there. So it was like very quickly back to normal for us. Cross border, when the attack happened on a team, and Pakistan was already a place where extra security checks would happen. Boards would also analyze a lot before sending a team, how long the tour would be, the security detailing around it. But I think this broke the camel's back, this episode. Uh, I think it has played a big role in Pakistan's gradual degradation over the years in terms of their cricketing structure, how they compete against world-class sides, and it has gone beyond just cricket as well. Even if you look at hockey in Pakistan, that has gone through, they're no more even a top 20 country. I think all this percolates, this becomes a political thing, this goes beyond cricket. And Pakistan used to compete pretty well in the late 2000s, even in World Cups. They won a World Cup, T20 one in England under Shahid Afridi's captaincy. They played the semi-finals in 2011 World Cup, which we also hinted on. But then there has been gradual shifting away. So not just from financial muscle losing that, but also from a cricketing perspective. Pakistan were very well respected sides in 80s, 90s, 2000s, all kinds of great players coming out. So I think this has been the biggest impact on them and the psyche of the country, psyche of the nation, um, and of course between India-Pakistan cricketing relations as well. That's why ICC always almost deliberately put India-Pakistan matches in ICC event there at least because that's the biggest game in cricket. Um, it has a huge impact, I think, on Pakistan in general. Even even the Champions Trophy, look at how the scheduling is working out in this one. Pakistan may not even play the final at home if they reach, if India is there. So yeah, what is your biggest takeaway from this if that attack hadn't happened?
Yeah, whenever we talk about the maligns of the society, about terrorism, about everything that is not so good with the society, sport always acts as a balm to that. But when the
Yeah.
attack really happens on the sport itself, that is when it forces people into realizing that we can't take the sport for granted, because there are real implications, and it is not isolated from everything else that is going on
Yes.
in the world. And I feel this is the first time when, at least in the recent history, this is the first time where all of us saw a cricket team being impacted by such a situation, and that also shows how delicate the situation in the country was. And as I said earlier, I do feel instead of big three, it could very well have been the big four, because Pakistan has always produced such amazing cricketers. You look at 90s, you look at early 2000s, they have had a plethora of talent, and it just took them into getting the team together to be able to win those big matches.
And massive fan base as well. I mean,
Massive
count
fan
everything.
base.
They might be also playing a five test match series against England and Australia. They might be talk about them being included in the top tier that they are talking about in test cricket now.
Absolutely. So I do feel Pakistan lost out on an entire generation for that. And when we spoke about 2007 World Cup win for India, and we spoke about maybe India might have lost those early years of advantage that it got because of IPL being such a massive success. Maybe that is exactly what we are seeing here. Pakistan losing out on those 10 years of international cricket in the country, and that has put them back so far behind the top three countries, England, India, and Australia. And it's an uphill task for them to compete in the tournaments and compete consistently, uh, and not just in tournaments, but also when it comes to the muscle power. Because we see with the current Champions Trophy, India just having their way with Pakistan board. And as you said, Pakistan being the host country and might not get to play the final there, they might not get to host the final in Pakistan. So, definitely a lost decade for them. So, yeah, with that said, SS, coming to our last story of the day, what's your third pick?
My third pick is again sticking to a World Cup, slowly going back in time, but again there's a theme that touches on Australia. It's the Cricket World Cup 99, the first proper World Cup that we all followed as kids. And Australia reached the Super Six, having lost to both New Zealand and Pakistan group stage. That means they had to actually win all the three matches in Super Six. They beat India, they beat Zimbabwe, and then they come up against the favorites, the one of the favorites, South Africa. South Africa made 271 at Leeds. Uh, Great knock by Herschel Gibbs. He actually scored a century in that game. And then Australia started the chase. They were 48 for 3. Ponting and Steve Waugh started steadying the ship. Steve Waugh was kind of counter-attacking 50 or 47 balls. And when he was at 56, off the bowling of Lance Klusener, the Centurion, Herschel Gibbs picks the catch, but was too quick to celebrate, drops it, and the umpire said it was a drop catch. Famously, Steve-O apparently said that you have dropped the cup, but in his autobiography, he later clarifies is that do you realize you have just cost your team the match? And yes, they had. Steve Waugh, in his 262nd ODI, made his second century, made 120. The ice cold guy that he was able to guide with two balls to spare Australia to a win. 4 days later, they came up against the same opposition, different ground at Edgbaston, and we all know what happened there. The famous run out and tied match, and because they had lost earlier, that had played a big role in the equation. And Australia progressed to the final. They did not do the same mistakes of 96. This time they absolutely obliterated the opposition in the 99 final. And the Steve Waugh legend was born. Australia's invincibles were born. They continue to dominate cricket in a way they are still dominating in some shape or form. So many things, but more importantly, it just added to the misfortune that South Africa had. 92, 99, still happening even to this day. We see David Miller failing in a World Cup final. They still haven't won apart from that one ICC Champions Trophy. Uh, it has played a lot on that, and there are so many what ifs around both South African cricket and Australian cricket. I would like to focus on South African cricket. What if Gibbs hadn't dropped the catch? What could have happened to South Africa in that World Cup and beyond? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that definitely was the first World Cup when I started watching cricket and properly followed a World Cup. And so many stories and legends around that particular instance of Gibbs dropping that catch. I very recently also heard an interview, I think it was Adam Gilchrist, who told a story about Shane Warne, where being the genius cricketing mind that he is, kind of predicted that Gibbs is celebrating way too early and is throwing the ball way too early to celebrate after taking a catch. And
Only Warren can
only
that
one could have
have that
done that.
insight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And he, in a way, predicted that Gibbs will drop a catch sometime in the future. And as it happened, it was that very match and a very pivotal situation. I feel if he had not dropped that catch, Australia would have gone on to lose the match. They would have crashed out of the tournament, and it would have probably been South Africa versus Pakistan in the finals. Might not have been such a one-sided affair this one, and maybe South Africa wins. But then we always see the kind of choke job that South Africa always pulls out. Even in the semi-finals, they should have won the match after the innings that Klusner played, but then at the end, they just don't know how to close the matches. So I feel Pakistan would have pulled through, although South Africa would have reached the finals. But then Pakistan, with their momentum, with their team, would have pulled through and won the tournament. So when it comes to South Africa, they would have had a slightly better show. Herschel Gibbs' legacy would have been a lot better. He would not be known for dropping Steve Waugh at such a pivotal point. But overall, I still feel that they would have missed a step here or there and would have gone on to lose the tournament. What about you, SS? What's your take?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think Gibbs redeemed himself slightly with that famous innings in the 434 chase. Uh, but yeah, nothing comes close to a World Cup defining match. It's tough. I think South Africa would have won the game. Australia would have knocked out. They would have reached the final, and South Africa and Pakistan were the two favorites coming in, both in really good form. I slightly favor South Africa. I think Pakistan would have a great chance in the final, but I think South Africa would have just. I think they had a bit more. I think, and Klusner was the difference maker. I think Klusner versus Azhar Mahmood, you know who to favor. Even though Pakistan has a slightly better bowling attack, but South Africa also had a very good attack as well. And on that Lord's pitch, I think South Africa could have won, and then that would have catapulted them. They could have won a couple of more World Cups here and there. ICC events played such a big role. They haven't been able to evade that psychological demise. People all talk about 92 and everything, but that 99 is the one that is like the central to this thesis about South Africa and choke play and their legacy. So I think South Africa would have won the World Cup and won a couple of more big high profile events from there on. Pretty sure. And that's the biggest thing. One of my favorite players ever is Carlos, and Carlos didn't have a World Cup to his name, and that was his time. He was playing in that World Cup. So, yeah, so these are our stories of the day. We both said three each, very compelling arguments. AB, if you had to pick one from the stories that I mentioned, which one do you think was the most consequential?
That is such a difficult question, it says, because the stories that we have discussed are also are such a part of folklore, at least the ones that you mentioned, and have had such huge impact. But I feel if we talk about all the what ifs that you mentioned and all the stories that you have told us today, I think if South Africa went on to win that World Cup, that would have changed the face of cricket the way we know it. Because you say that they would have won multiple ICC tournaments, and that would have also improved their entire cricket. And we know South Africa has always been such a dominant force in world cricket. They just have to capitalize at those crunch moments. So I think that would have been the most consequential moment if South Africa goes on to win a lot of ICC tournaments. That is because the first one, Dhoni coming to bat at in the 2011 final, I feel India already had a World Cup in 2007. So although that would have
Anyways, you did say that we would have still won the final.
yeah, yeah, and McGrath getting injured in the 2005 Ashes, we know, one Ashes going to England. Of course, as fans, as neutral fans, we enjoyed watching England win. But then Australia was able to recover from that, and they were a very dominant side over the next couple of decades. So my pick is Gibbs taking that catch of war, and South Africa, if they go on to win the '99 World Cup, that would have been massive. So that is my take on your stories. Now I give that question back to USS. Out of all the stories that I mentioned, which one do you think was the most consequential?
I think going to be one of the hardest questions that I have ever tackled on this podcast. I like all the three, and I have constantly thought which one would I prefer. I sometimes have gone to World Series of Cricket. I was also thinking about the Pakistan one because it has impacted the country so much and everything. But I think all things considered, I think the story 2007, ICL, IPL, um, I think this is the most consequential in terms of the impact of money, impact of getting BCCI even bigger than it was already, how it has taken the game forward in a lot of aspects. Now, a lot of innovations from IPL are getting into international cricket as well. And the cult of Dhoni in a way as well. Cult of now these franchises are buying franchises outside their country as well with the same brand. So we're essentially going into a super league format where you will have IPL owners fighting all across the world. So many things around it. I think this is the one more consequential. If we would have done fairly better in 2007 ODI World Cup, or maybe we hadn't won the 2007 T20 World Cup, how it could have the pickup of T20 cricket in India and everything around it, and the IPL might have come 5 years down later, and it could have been a different ball game. So I think all things considered, I pick this one up.
Interesting. I also kind of agree because everything else might have taken cricket from 0 to 1. This one took cricket from 1 to 10, or probably from 1
Yeah,
to
yeah.
100.
Now we are talking about Olympics becoming a global sport. There are 100 countries now playing T20 internationals, all because probably of the pickup, because IPL made the world and ICC recognize the value and the power this format has. And it's going to get
Absolutely.
even bigger. We are probably only at 100, it can reach 1,000. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so this was today's episode. Probably this is going to be a series we'll keep revisiting whenever we feel dry of active cricket. And we'll keep bringing new topics. Maybe one of them will spawn out in a full-blown episode as well. So I'm pretty sure we will hear more of these stories going forward. And yeah, we will be soon back with a bonus episode of Hot Takes. We are also following a series there of Unbreakable Records. So tune in to that one as well. We are available on all podcasting platforms. You will see a lot of shorts and clips being posted on social media regarding us. We will keep doing that as well. And yeah, happy to hear your feedback and keep listening in. Take care. Bye bye.